Well, who better to dust off their crystal balls than the BBC's chief cricket commentator Jonathan Agnew and the Sultan of Statistics, the Doyen of Data, Andy Zaltzman. Gentlemen, hello to you both.
Well, seasonal greetings, everybody. Nice to be talking cricket, isn't it, this time of year?
Well, indeed it is. And how it's going to work is this. We'll do the test side first and the world of test cricket, and then we'll focus on the white ball game as well. And any other business and perhaps some predictions there from you both as well. So, a massive year for England's test side, Aggers. Where are they? Because at the end of 2024, I haven't got a clue where we stand. 17 test matches, they've won 9, they've lost 8. It feels as brilliant one moment as chaotic as it is the next, but it's a huge 12 months.
Yeah, well, it is. And you know, we talked about New Zealand. You know, I wanted that to be the start of this process rather than the end of it. And I was a bit disappointed to hear Ben Stokes talking about, that's the end of a long road and all that. But actually, they're playing one of the best teams in the world. And yes, they won the series, but there was that familiar chaotic collapse at the end that we've seen. Well, we saw it in India, we saw it against Sri Lanka, we saw it in Pakistan, and we've now seen it in New Zealand. So that's, 4 pretty chaotic and I thought pathetic attempts, really. Certainly the one I saw in Islamabad was woeful, and Sri Lanka at the Oval, and that's why I think people aren't really very sure about where England are. On the one hand, they're playing some excellent cricket, and then on the other hand, they just produce a performance like that. And if they do that at the start of either of these series coming up against India or against Australia, then I fear for them. Now, if they play as they in the promising way in which they have played a lot of Test cricket in the last 12 months, let's be honest. But if they do start like that in either of these two series, then I think they've got a chance. But I don't know quite where they are. You revel in the good stuff and think this is fantastic. Bring on the Ashes. And then you witness those sort of cataclysmic performances, and you think, wow, what is that all about? What do they say after it? Have they learnt anything from those performances in India, from that performance against Sri Lanka, from that performance in Islamabad, from that performance in the last Test match there in New Zealand? Have they actually sat down and talked about what is the cause of this and why it has happened? Because if you look at the fact that there have been 4 out of those 17 tests that have ended like that, then you'd think, well, perhaps they're not saying anything. They just shrug it off and head for the golf course. Now, that's the negative way of looking at it, but people are going to start thinking that. If that trend continues, then they are going to start being picked up for the socialising aspect of it, because they should be better than that. They're showing that they're a better team than that most of the time, or a lot of the time. And then there's this silly performance that comes in too often. So I'm with you, Henry. I don't really know where England are at the moment. They've got a massive year ahead. It's the year that will define certainly Stokes' captaincy if he's fit. It'll define the careers of a number of these players, and I just hope that they're focused on that, not putting too much pressure on themselves because of that, but being aware that this is a year that they've got to be at the top of their games.
Oh, what fun it is to hear Aggers off his long run early in the podcast. But
well,
you're right.
Get in there.
But you're right, because there have been so many frustrations in 2024, because we've seen some brilliant moments and then we've seen some horror moments as well. I mean, Salt's next year is a quieter year in terms of the number and the volume of test matches, but there are some mighty big ones in there.
Yes, and part of the reason for that is cricket doesn't really work on calendar years. It works on the sort of broadly from an English perspective, a summer season and a winter season. It just happened that the tests for this winter and last winter have all been in 2024. So it's not been a sort of unusually large amount of test cricket broadly. It happens to be packed into 12 months rather than spread over 18. And when you say, well, we don't know quite where England are, I'm not sure we quite know where England's opponents are either. India and Australia. India had that 3-0 home defeat with New Zealand. As we record, they're 1-1 in Australia. Clearly still a hugely talented side with the premier weapon in Test cricket at the moment in Jasprit Bumrah. But a number of players, particularly on the batting side, whose form has been not great for quite a long time. Australia Similarly, 1-1 at home with India. They drew that series with West Indies right at the start of the year. They've also got a number of batters who are sort of well off their best. And there's some questions over the age of their bowling attack thus far against India. They've been very good, but another year on, who knows? So I don't think we really know where anyone is. We talked in the review of 2024 about how unpredictable Test cricket has become, and that sort of makes 2025, from England's perspective, these two huge series against India at home and Australia away, particularly tantalising.
Agus, it's amazing how much can change in the space of a year, and I know that England's final Test match of 2023 happened to be at the end of the English summer, but it was a bowling attack of Stuart Broad, James Anderson, Chris Wokes, Moeen Ali and Mark Wood, only one of whom was featuring in the final Test match that was played in 2024. So it's an incredible turnaround. So much can happen. It feels like a lot has happened.
It does happen, and interestingly, I get the feeling from McCullum and Stokes that they don't want that amount of change. Now there was obviously retirements amongst those names that you mentioned there, rather than dropping players, and they seem very loath to do that. And in some ways, you can look at the teams that have been announced recently, or you can actually predict what the likely teams are going to be, and they do more or less pick themselves, because you know that Stokes and McCullum are so loath at dropping players. So we can all go on, and we will do, about Zach Crawley as an example. And yet you look at virtually everyone's prediction for who's going to be opening the batting in the Ashes, so a year away, and Zach Crawley's name features virtually every time, because you just know the way that Stokes and McCullum operate. So I think that that turnover of players, as I say, is not actually down to players being dropped. I mean, Ollie Pope's another one who we'll be talking about, and yet you just feel that he's almost certain to be there, because that's just the way that they like doing it. They show tremendous faith in their players, and that's a very good thing, by the way. If you are an England player, to have that confidence in you, and then people got a bit grumpy when Zach Crawley was sort of given this carte blanche. Well, he's playing with us as long as he wants, more or less, when he was going through that horror patch. But then he came through that for a while, didn't he? And it does do a lot of good. As any sportsman, I guess, but certainly I can speak from experience as a cricketer. If you know that you're not going to get binned after one bad performance, it makes you relax enormously. And from a bowling perspective, you're not searching for wickets. You can just get on with it and bowl. And as long as you know you're bowling well, then you're not going to get sacked. And on the other hand, you do have to give initiative to players who are on the fringe of Test status, and who are those who are playing county cricket and need that incentive to get out there and play on dank and miserable days at Grace Road or wherever it may be, in Cardiff or whatever, because you need the incentive of maybe playing for England, or being picked for playing for England, and that raises the level of county cricket, which makes everybody below that Test level that little bit better. So you do have to get the balance right. On the one hand, you have to support the players who are there and really give them every opportunity that they can, because you believe they're good players, and they must be good players to have got to that level. But on the other hand, there's the integrity of selection. I thought Josh Hull was a crazy selection last summer. He just came from nowhere. And there are others there in the pecking order who are going to turn around and say, hang on a minute, what is the point of running in and bowling all these overs every year if this kid gets picked, having hardly played any cricket at all? What am I doing? So you have to get the balance right, incentivising those who are trying to get into that England team while backing those who are already there.
I often talk results about whether England know their best team. Do you reckon you know what England's best team is at the moment? The team you'd like to see heading out to face the music in Perth?
Well, in Perth, I don't know yet, because there's 6 tests to come. The one-off test against Zimbabwe, then those 5 tests with India, who've been generally broadly competitive in England, and a lot of series certainly this millennium. They had a couple of heavy defeats, but in the 2018 series was 4-1, but it was a very close series, and then in 2021 India were 2-1 up, then didn't play that final test. Came back and got beaten by the new sort of Bazball era England team for eventually a 2-2 draw over 2 series. But they challenged England in England. So I think, more what is England's best team for that first India test, which I guess is a slightly different question, and you would hope they would just focus on that for now. There are a number of sort of questions. With Crawley, I think if you feel his batting is suited to Australia, he played one very, very good innings there in Sydney last time. Didn't do a huge amount other than that in the other two tests that he played. There might even be an argument for leaving him out in the summer and saying, well, you'll come on the Ashes tour. He had a very good year in 2023, and then in the series in India, he was England's most consistent player. Only got the 100, but lots of 70 scores. He had this real problem getting from 70 to 80, which recurred in the start of the Pakistan series. But since that first test in Pakistan, he's had a really tough run and was absolutely eviscerated by Matt Henry in New Zealand. So I guess it's that delicate balance of you wanting players to feel secure, but at the same time risking further damage. It's very hard to tell when that moment comes where it's better to take a player out. And as Aga said, they've erred on the side of keeping players longer, although when they do make decisions, they tend to be fairly final and decisive, as happened with Ben Foakes and Johnny Bairstow at the start of last summer. So in terms of bowling, I think England's in a much better place than we thought they would be in the post-Anderson Broad era. And again, something we talked about in the Review of the Year podcast, 156 out of their 294 wickets taken by bowlers in 2024 by players who hadn't played Test cricket at the start of the year. It's been an extraordinary regeneration. And you mentioned Josh Hull, didn't look great on his debut. He still picked up 3 wickets, but Carse had no red ball stats to back his selection, has done tremendously well. Atkinson had decent red ball stats, but I don't think anyone expected him to be as good as he has been. So whatever they're doing with their selection, it has, particularly with the bowlers, worked very well over this last year.
Do you feel more confident, Aggers, now, particularly around England's bowlers in Test match cricket, than perhaps you ever dreamed that you could do post Broad and Anderson?
Well, yes, I think certainly Atkinson has had an extraordinary year, hasn't he? But then you look at the way he bowls and you think, well, yeah, of course he does. He bowls at a good pace, bowls at that fullish length, keeps going nicely. He just looks a good bowler. Bryden Carse won me over in Pakistan. I wasn't quite sure what he did up to that point, but he's got tremendous heart, ran in hard in those poor conditions really for quick bowling, obviously out there in Pakistan, but in the heat as well. And again, he bowls that full length. That's the beauty of it. And it's you can flip it round and say, we're talking about Matt Henry and Zach Crawley. I mean, Henry is sort of like a nemesis for Crawley. He's the worst sort of bowler that Crawley would want to face, because he bowls at a lively pace, he gets it up there. Crawley's always looking for that booming drive, as we know, and that is just the area, obviously, that someone like Henry will bowl at that good pace and nick, off you go, caught second slip, or where it may be behind the wickets. And I just really wish that Crawley and Pope, if he gets a chance, we've said it so much. I don't think England are going to win the Ashes, for instance, by going out and trying to smack the ball about. I just don't think they're going to do that. The Australian bowlers are too good. They all are going to bowl that fullish length and challenge that off stump, just outside off stump line, and relentlessly banging away at that. And I just don't think going out there and trying to smack it about against a new ball is the answer. I think you play and you wait until the ball is 30 overs old and those quick bowlers have got a spell in their legs, and then you can start to be a bit more expansive, because the ball will still be coming onto the bat on those pitches. But I just want to see them play more intelligent cricket than has been played, and we've seen some terrific entertaining cricket. Of course we have. Everyone's talking about Test cricket again, which is fantastic. But there's so many strands to Test cricket, which is why it's such a deep game. There's so much more depth to Test cricket than there is to any other format, obviously, that's being played in cricket. And part of that is that sometimes you do have to play a thoughtful, yes, defensive game. Defensive does not mean negative. It's an essential part of playing Test cricket. Sometimes you do have to go into a more defensive frame of mind, because that way you work yourself back into the game again. And I go back to those collapses and the horror defeats that we talked about. It was as if they sort of thought, oh, we're out of this game, bang, 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 that's it. Whereas you can, at least show some show some fight. I mean, some of the dismissals in that last Test match, you read through it, people caught long off, they're stumped, reverse ramping. I mean, what is going on when you're losing a Test match? What frame of mind are they in? They are going to have to get, I think, a much more hard-working, I don't mean training, they are all very fit, but hard-working out in the middle. Sometimes, as Mike Atherton described, you've got to score ugly runs, you've got to get out there and fight. If you only score 40, 50 runs in a session, okay, but you haven't lost a wicket and you're still in the game and you fought your way up towards it and you got some overs in the bowler's legs. And that's another point, by the way, while we talk about all this, that the amount of rest that England's quick bowlers get is just not enough. The way that England bat and score their runs so quickly and get dismissed so quickly, the poor old bowlers, and they're going to be playing on hard pitches out in Australia in heat. They need more rest than that. They need actually to have a day sitting down with their feet up, having a cup of tea, doing the sun crossword, and letting the batsmen go out there and do their job, because otherwise it's going to be a very, very hard tour for those bowlers.
One of the sort of notable facets of England's play under Stokes and McCullum is, and it has been inconsistent. Had a great first year. Since then, they've run, I think, just more than they've lost, and had, as Aggers was saying, some great victories, but also some fairly terrible defeats. But what they do is they put a different challenge to their opponents that they're not used to facing. We saw this really strongly in the Ashes here in 2023. They attacked the Australian bowlers in the way that they'd never been attacked before. Cummins went at 4.3 and over. Hazelwood at over 4.5 and over. Stark, has always been quite an attacking bowler who's gone for quite a lot of runs per over. But even so, the way they attacked those bowlers was something that they hadn't faced before, and they didn't deal with it particularly well, particularly as the series evolved, and they got demolished at Old Trafford in the one drawn Test when England got almost 600 and Crawley had that superb 189. So this is, I think that the philosophy of England as a team is to present different challenges to their opponents, whether it's with the sort of creative field placings and bowling strategies that we've seen under Stokes, or this sort of historically unique way of batting. Now, clearly it doesn't always work, and it can always be improved. And I think that that balance and having a bit more variety of when to attack, when to accumulate. Which you've seen at times during the last 2.5 years, I think is critical to his success. But it would be really interesting to see, if they take that same approach of trying to get Cummins and Hazelwood, who've both been really good since that Ashes. Hazelwood 41 wickets at 15, Cummins 44 at 20 since the 2023 Ashes, and they both took a lot of tap. It'd be really interesting to see how they adapt to that challenge when England go there next year. A lot of it depends on the type of pitches. Last time England were there, certainly 3 of the 5 pitches were very seamer friendly, and England didn't deal with it at all well in the old school. And generally under Bazball, when the balls move laterally, is when they've struggled. So it'll be very interesting to see what pitches Australia prepare and what, if anything, the Australian bowlers do differently to deal with this unique challenge that this England batting lineup presents.
There is a massive series, Aggers, against India, which will be the barometer of where England are. It'll go a long way to determining who goes to Australia to play in that Ashes series. It's a thrilling prospect, the India series, not least because of Jasprit Bumrah, but also the other narratives of Virat Kohli and that sort of senior group of India players.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't want to sort of just brush the Zimbabwe Test aside either, because although that you can still think, okay, it's a 4-day game against Zimbabwe, what's the point of it? But actually, if you look at the individuals that we've been sort of starting to point the finger at, that's a big game. I mean, if Zach Crawley goes out against Zimbabwe, gets a big double 100, well, okay, there will be some people that will say, well, of course he's bound to. They're not very good. It's only a 4-day game, blah, blah, blah. But actually, it would do wonders for his confidence. It is a test match, a test match century or whatever he might score. And the same goes for Ollie Pope. So, if you're an England selector, say, well, that's it, everything's sorted out. Ollie Pope's got some runs there, batting at number 3. That takes care of that again. And then Zach Crawley's obviously up there, restored as opening. Do they then, because they do like to put their faith in the players, as we've talked about, does that mean that they're nailed on for the rest of the summer? Conversely, if they fail, and Zach Crawley fails again, Ollie Pope jitters all over the place and plays a silly shot and gets out cheaply batting at number 3, does that bring the axe down, because they are then taking a deep breath and starting this very big series against India. It's disappointing, I think, that Jofra Archer's not available for that Test match, because that would have been, I think, just a perfect comeback for him. I haven't even touched on him now. I get that, but for me, he's going to have to play some Test cricket to prove that he's fit to go to Australia. Just a couple of games, I guess, because it's unrealistic these days to expect a fast bowler like Archer or Wood or Stone or any of these guys to play all 5 tests either against India or indeed against Australia. You just can't do that anymore. You can't play full series if you're bowling like that. The tests simply come up too quickly, and there aren't the rests in between. So it just seems that, having been absent for so long, that Zimbabwe test would have been ideal for Archer, just to get back into the whole business of being out there in the field again for a day and a bit. All those sorts of things that are important. I understand why they've allowed him to go and play the IPL, because there is this uncertainty about his fitness, and the rule changes of the IPL means if he wasn't in the auction this time, that would rule him out for the next 2 years, and because we don't know how fit he is. But that Test match would have just been a good one, I think, for him to come back, rather than a sort of a crucial India game when the pressure's on and maybe England have won down in the series or something. Anyway, that's by the by. The fact is, yes, India is a fascinating series, and we tend to play India, and it's come up a little bit more quickly this time, but we do tend to play India off and away in Ashes years. And that has often had a real derailing effect on the England team, because they've gone to India and usually lost. And so they've tossed a load of players out as a result of that, playing in completely different conditions and circumstances, which they'll face a few months later in Australia. But it's just the impact of that series of playing against good opposition on spinning pitches in India. And that's proved fatal for a number of players down the years. Now, this is slightly different, and of course it is at home. But what has changed enormously over the last generation is that India now come here massively equipped with outstanding fast bowlers themselves, which they never used to do. Used to come and play 4 spinners. Bishan Bedi and Prasanna and Venkat and these guys turning their arms over. And of course, they weren't the right players for these sorts of conditions. That's why India now are much more challenging. They've got a pace attack that's as good as any in the world. And in Jasprit Bumrah, who's an outstanding, very different, very unorthodox cricketer. I love watching him bowl. He's just so full of enthusiasm. He loves what he's doing. You look at a lot of fast bowlers, and it looks like it's hard work. They're puffing and blowing and out they go, and they go in and bowl another ball, and on they go. Bumrah just never seems tired to me. He just relishes what he does. He's in the form of his life, very dangerous, great pace. I would imagine he's very difficult to pick up early on if you haven't faced him for a little while. I mean, I would think that if he would just, at every new batsman he bowls at, bang, bowl full and straight, first ball, boom. There's a good chance that actually they're gonna miss it. Steve Smith being a prime example of that. Feet all over the place, looking for the ball, bang, it's on you before you know it. And he's extremely dangerous. But they've got a lot of good players, and that will be a challenging series. And the question again will be for England, if it doesn't go well, and given that I don't think there's a huge number of reserves, because of, again, we go back to the way that England have picked their team over the last 2 or 3 years. There aren't naturals waiting in the wings necessarily. There are 1 or 2. Do you discard players who might have a poor series against India, or do you show faith in them and take them out to Australia? But that's just one of those little strands of little stories that's going to be running through the course of the summer.
What about England's 12 months more generally? And let's draw our attention a little bit to the Ashes. To me, and I know you've said this before, it feels like the defining year of the Stokes-McCullum project.
Well, I think so. I mean, certainly, yes, I'd agree with all of that, actually. And as we speak, we don't really know how fit Ben Stokes is, and all the ramifications of that, how he'll be able to bowl. He told me before we went to Pakistan, I saw him, and he said that he has to be so careful with that hamstring injury he was getting over them, because if it went again, you'd need an operation. It's a serious injury that he's got. How are they going to use him in the future? will he even be fit? I mean, the Stokes dilemma is a huge one, I think. He balances the team. He's one of the best batsmen in the team, and he's a terrific captain, a outstanding tactician, brilliant at working out teams, getting into batsmen's faces, and all that. All of those sorts of things. Even if he's overrated, isn't great. But England without Ben Stokes in Australia would be a very big hit. Who would be captain? That is. You don't even want to think about it in a way. Ollie Pope is vice captain. Can you really see Ollie Pope leading England to Australia? It doesn't stand out, does it? I mean, Harry Brook. He seems incredibly early to be laying that onto him. I mean, Joe Root seemed to be the one to me who would be an obvious one to at least approach, and with his seniority, his experience, and probably his last tour of Australia. I think he'd probably be my go-to person in that worst case scenario of Stokes not being fit. But this is going to be again something that we're watching. I mean, every time the ball goes to Stokes in the field, he runs after it. You hold your breath, and you just hope you don't see him clutching the back of that hamstring again. And it's gone once more. I don't think they'll be able to use him as the bowler that he would like to. Being realistic, but that's again just going to be one of these talking points that's going to see us through until the start of the Ashes.
Do you believe England can win in Australia?
I do, yes, absolutely, I do. I think they've got to start well. I think they go out and have one of these frantic performances that we've seen, and as we've already talked about in this conversation. Then that would just be a disaster. They've got to start solidly. They've got to start well. And you know what? Even if they go out there and they actually, the first game is a draw, that in itself would be a good achievement. Because as you know, going out and winning the Ashes is extremely difficult. I've only seen them do it once in my 30-odd years of doing this job. That's how difficult it is. You've got to win one more game than the opposition anyway to win them back again. So get out there and you might have to really work hard. In fact, you will have to go out and work hard. The England team that did win in 10-11 worked incredibly hard. That first Test match at the Gabba, which they drew, it was like a victory. That it was, in every sense, it was like a victory for England. It was like a big defeat for Australia. Well, there's no shame in going out and getting a really hard-fought draw, saying, right, bring on the next game. There's no shame in that. It's part of a 5-match series. But I think a huge amount. You asked the question. I think a huge amount depends on that first Test. And having seen, obviously, the India game there, where the ball did do a bit, certainly early on. If England, they had to fight. They had to work very hard. If they fall in a heap, and we see an Islamabad, we see a Wellington, we see an Oval, then you feel that it'd be very hard to come back for 1-0 down, 4 games to go, and you've got to go out there and win one more than the Aussies to win the Ashes back.
They do tend to start well in series, those Alts.
Well, yes, until this India this India series that's currently going on. I don't know, never know sort of how much we can read into historic patterns, and particularly with the different sort of order of matches, with the series starting in Perth rather than Brisbane, still quite a new ground. And Australia have had a bit of a mixed year. They began the year with that, 1-1 series draw with the West Indies, lost that gripping second Test, only a few runs when Shamar Joseph ran through them, then lost the first Test against India. So back-to-back home defeats, responded well after that first Test defeat to India. But they've got a number of sort of issues in their team. In terms of their batting in 2024, before this final Test of the year, 28 runs per wicket. It's their second lowest in the last 40 years in a calendar year. But they're bowling 23.5 runs per wicket, their third best since 1959. So again, kind of trend of sort of quite low-scoring Test cricket all round. We've seen Australia's batting struggle quite significantly. Looking at the individuals, Usman Khawaja, since the 2023 Ashes, 10 Tests averaging 28 in his 22 before that, after his spectacular recall with twin centuries at the SCG in the last Ashes series. He'd averaged 60 in those 22 Tests with 700s. Marnus Labuschagne, since December 2022, against South Africa. 23 tests, averaged 30. He'd averaged over 60 in his previous 30 tests since coming back into the side in the 2019 Ashes. Steve Smith, since the start of that South Africa series in December 2022, 23 tests, averaged 37. Has got 100 against India, but you compare that with his previous form from 2013 up to December 2022. He'd averaged 66 in 78 tests with 2,900. One of the most extraordinary spells of elongated good form in Test history. Mitchell Marsh has been struggling recently. Cameron Green has been injured, still hasn't achieved consistency with the bat, and has not been used a lot with the ball due to injuries. Travis Head, superb against India so far, but he'd had a bit of a dip before that as well, after his extraordinary form, which began with that scintillating century in Brisbane at the start of the last season. He almost laid the template for Bazball. He'd have gone at 50 per 100 balls over his career up to that point, closer to 80 since then. So they've got a lot of potential weaknesses in the batting line. They still haven't found an opener to replace Warner. They're trying a very promising youngster Sam Constas in the Boxing Day test against India. So there are weaknesses for England to exploit. I was looking also about what England have done in the summers before going to Australia. And actually, losing might be a good idea because in 2021 they had a poor summer and then got hammered in Australia. But before that, all the Ashes series that England have lost since the 1986-7 series, they've gone on the back of a pretty decent home summer with a winning record, more wins than losses, apart from 1998 when they lost to Sri Lanka, but had beaten South Africa 2-1 in the 5-test series that summer. And they've only won one of those Ashes series, that 2010 series. In 1986, they lost at home to India and New Zealand, then went to Australia and won 2-1. In 1970, England won the Ashes. They got hammered 4-1 by the rest of the world team in what were at the time considered test matches, went to Australia and won 2-0. Even 1954-55, when England won 3-1, they'd had a 1-1 home summer drawn series with Pakistan on Pakistan's first test tour. So maybe, if England lose to India, Henry, we can cling to that. It's all part of looking at the stats for how to win in Australia. Going there with a winning summer generally doesn't work.
Well, more to come in just a moment, but a little reminder, it may be cold, dark and not at all cricket weather in the UK, but fear not, the BBC has so much live cricket for you now and around the corner. The continuation of the Border Gavaskar Trophy, the Big Bash League as well, full commentary from Australia, and then also down under, the Women's Ashes gets underway at 11:30pm on Saturday, 11th of January. Myself and Alex Hartley will be live in Sydney for the first ODI in the multi-format series. You can listen on BBC Sounds 5 Sports Extra and the BBC Sport website and app for ball-by-ball commentary from Australia throughout the whole series.
The TMS Podcast from BBC Radio 5 Live.
I want you two to be frivolous at the end of the podcast with some out there predictions, by the way. So get your thinking caps on for that. But let's move on to the white ball game. It's a different England side, isn't it? Because they've had a disappointing 18 months. Terrible World Cup in 2023. They struggled and lost badly in the semi-final of the World Cup. In the T20s in the Caribbean as well. But, Zoltz, Brendan McCullum comes in, he picks a side full of test players that he knows well, and there's just a little bit more energy. But more generally, it's quite a quiet year for white ball cricket after the Champions Trophy.
Yes, and 2024, England have played only 8 one-day internationals. That's the fewest they've played in a calendar year since 1995. Won 3, lost 5. It's the third year in a row England have had more losses than wins in ODI cricket. And that's the first time in England's ODI history they've had 3 consecutive losing years. In all, 29 wins, 29 losses since the 2019 World Cup final, having had 65 wins, 26 losses over that World Cup cycle under Owen Morgan's captaincy. And this is much closer to where historically England have been throughout ODI history. They've never really been wildly good or bad over a 4-year World Cup cycle, always round about the 50% win percentage mark, other than that one extraordinary 4-year period. So maybe that's sort of England's base level of ODI cricket has generally been adequate. Now, we saw the turnaround McCullum achieved in Test cricket very rapidly in that 2022 summer, and then the winter winning 3-0 in Pakistan. Whether he can achieve that in white ball cricket, slightly more challenging. I guess there isn't quite the same stylistic point of difference, given that most, you sort of have to play one-day cricket in a more attacking manner. But one of the notable things about him is how he has almost unleashed the confidence of players, and that's something that I think has been lacking in England's white ball, well, certainly one-day international team for some time now. But there's not a lot of form line coming into the Champions Trophy, and all the mayhem that there's been around where the games are going to be played, and the ongoing mega bicker between India and Pakistan. There's not a lot of sort of form to look at coming into this tournament. The Champions Trophy is a bit of an odd tournament. Previous sort of tournaments have been quite exciting. 2017, the last time it was held, was an excellent tournament, only 2.5 weeks. You get a sort of little concentrated burst of ODI cricket, and I think probably the future of that format, if it survives, is going to be in international tournaments rather than bilateral series. So hopefully they'll get through the politics, and it'll show one-day cricket in a good light.
Yeah, I mean, the Champions Trophy for me is it's a tournament that the World Game could do without. It was saved by that 2017 tournament, wasn't it? I mean, it just seemed then that it was right on the brink of the ICC, in my view, taking the right decision and just through popular demand, really, and player demand, workload-wise, just said, look, this is let's be honest, it is purely a money spinner. That's all it is. It's another tournament to flog to TV. That's really what it is. I think England have actually picked quite an interesting side. I will be interested to see how McCullum goes about it, because if you think that Bazball was wild and exciting in Test cricket, well, you ain't seen nothing yet. If he wants England to go out and play as he did. And we'll all remember, of course, 2015, when really he showed England the way, and he showed Owen Morgan the way. The way he batted in that tournament himself was unbelievable. And then he played a hideous shot in the final, having got New Zealand there. And you think, oh, come on, really? And that is the way that he plays. And if again we're going to go out and we're going to have this sort of approach in this white ball format, it'll be very interesting to see how they go. He has picked Canadian Test players. I'm really pleased to see Joe Root in there, and I hope he bats at 3, and I hope he sort of controls the pace of the innings. He's such an experienced batsman. It's extraordinary to think that he hasn't featured as much recently. Joss Buttler. I mean, he's in a really interesting situation. He's in his last 10 innings of 50 overs white ball cricket, he's reached double figures 4 times, and he's the captain. He scored 1 half century that time. He's had bad injury issues, as we know. It just seems to me that his confidence as a captain isn't very high, and that guillotine is just sort of hovering just above. There are others too. Saltz, he's got 5 half centuries in 27 games. Livingston, 4 half centuries in 33 matches. There are players there who have got a bit to do, really, in this format. Now, it might be, and those two particular, I've picked those out because they are the sort of batsmen who actually might relish the McCullum approach, and just given the freedom and the confidence and the support and the backing to go out and play the sort of innings that they're certainly capable of playing, but haven't necessarily produced in 50 overs cricket up to now. Salt's got 100, of course. But I think if you look at the balance of the side, that is not a bad team. Who do they face? They face Australia, they face Afghanistan, and they face South Africa. So that's 3 games away from the semi-finals. So they're up against some reasonable opponents, and don't write Afghanistan off, by the way, playing in those sort of conditions either in Pakistan. So they're not easy fixtures. But as I say, I'm with Saltz rather. The one thing Champions Trophy cricket does have is it matters if you lose, and I think that's where people are a bit fed up with the bilateral 5 one-day international series where, well, okay, we've lost that one, play again in 3 days' time. I just don't think there's much of a future for that. This is the one chance that 50 overs cricket really has to redeem itself, because if there just isn't enough jeopardy in 50 overs cricket for me at the moment. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. But I do like the look of the balance of this side. Obviously fascinated to see how McCullum runs it.
The summer white ball series, by the way, it's no longer the case where India would play an extended series as per previous tours. Actually, England have got 6 games against West Indies and 6 games against South Africa, and the next ICC tournament is next February. That's a T20 World Cup, and then a further 18 months until the next 50-over World Cup. So there's actually not a vast amount, and we talk about Brendan McCullum's workload, Zoltz, but it's not a huge in tray in terms of white ball cricket.
No, and it's one of the problems 50 over cricket has, that people, I mean, we used to complain that there was too much of it. Now there's sort of too little, so there's no sort of narrative thread going through it. And particularly in terms of the structure of the English summer, having these standalone white ball series, I don't think captures the imagination of cricket fans. You think back to 2018, England played India in a T20 series and a one-day international series. Before the Test cricket, you get that story building up over the course of the summer, and ideally that should be the default for international cricket, but because it's the best thing to do and eminently sensible, it'll probably never happen again. So it's sort of frustrating. I think Test cricket is the format I've always loved the most, but 50 over cricket is, sort of fascinating format, particularly when it has context. You see in tournaments when people get into it, sort of the back end of the big international tournaments, it's a gripping format that has that more narrative variety than T20 cricket is able to produce with its sort of fewer number of balls and potential turning points. And I think it's a shame that it's been allowed to wither. Particularly think back to 2019. Got a gripping tournament, the 2017 Champions Trophy we talked about, had a lot going on, and 50 over cricket has been sort of quietly taken to a barn and is being not particularly humanely destroyed, which I think is, the cricketing calendar is a bizarre thing, and as I've said before, if you keep squeezing the golden goose, what emerges from it might not be an egg.
It's a shame for the supporters, because a lot of cricket lovers will go and watch a 50 overs game. And they go with their mates or whatever. They do it every year. They go along and watch, but and you see everything, don't you? You see a result and all of that. The problem now increasingly is you don't see the best team. You don't know who's going to be playing for England because there's resting and everything else going on. And I go back to that point again of jeopardy, and it's just so much better a game. Any game is surely is better when it matters if you lose, and that's how the Champions Trophy has managed to hang on up to this point. But I think this tournament's an important one for that format of the game.
There was some talk and some suggestion and rumour that it could become a T20 tournament in future. So just in case we haven't got enough of those. Just finally on the white ball
side. Why don't you make it 100? That would make it even more exciting.
Well, indeed. Okay, then. Predictions. I want something really left field and also a dead certainty across Test and white ball cricket. A couple then, Zoltz. What's your dead certainty to happen in Test match cricket over the course of the next 12 months?
I think the dead certainty is that we're going to get two absolutely gripping series with England in Test cricket against India and Australia. I wouldn't be surprised if both series are 3-2 one way or the other, or 2-2 if there's a bit of rain around. I can't wait to see them. In terms of left field predictions, Henry, and this is not something I think will happen, but it's something that I think conceivably could happen. Johnny Bairstow opening the batting in the first Test in Perth.
Oh, come on. There you go. That is left field. Aggers, go on then. In Test cricket, I mean, I suppose chuck in there, how many out of the 10 matches, the big Test, if you like, are England going to win?
Yeah, well, that's true. I mean, I do believe, and I agree with Zoltz, I think they're not going to be, he read out that sort of 1-0 tied or drawn series or whatever it was against Pakistan in 1954. That doesn't happen anymore. They're going to be 3-2s and 2-3s. These two series coming up with really tragically India refusing to play Pakistan in Test cricket, which it really has to be sorted out by this new ICC administration. It cannot carry on like this. It's just not doing anybody any good at all. But without that taking place, these two upcoming Test series are the biggest in Test cricket. England-India, England-Australia. I really hope, but I think that there will be, at the end of the Test series in Australia, an increasingly voluble conversation about 4-day Test cricket. Because if the best series that there are in the world at the moment simply produce 4-day games, it's going to be very hard to argue in favour of 5-day Test cricket, which I think is a real shame. You need that fifth day. You just really do need that fifth day. But I just think there's mounting pressure. It's happening already. You can hearing it in Australia. And it's getting louder and louder about that argument for having Test cricket over 4 days. The argument will be, well, look, let's face it, if these two best Test series at the moment are only producing 4-day games, what's the point? And I really hope that doesn't happen. Utterly left field, something that It's going to happen one day. Whether it happens over the next 12 months or so remains to be seen. But playing in the same England team for the first time in, 20 years, Flintoff and Vaughan will line up together.
Very good. Right, I like that. And in Test cricket, I want a one-word answer from you both. Who is going to be England's leading wicket taker over the next 12 months? Salts?
Ooh. That is one word. I think Atkinson again. My other prediction, I think South Africa will win the World Test Championship.
Okay.
It's slightly left field.
That is left field.
I
Particularly
think it
given
would be good for
previous
Test cricket,
records at
certainly.
ICC events. Aggers, leading test wicket taker for England next 12 months.
Well, I know who I want it to be. I want it to be Wood, because he does work so hard. He brings such joy to fast bowling, which is hard work. He does it with a great smile on his face, huge enthusiasm. He's got to play enough games for that to happen, and you just, obviously seriously doubt that that's going to happen. But just for the sheer joy of doing a really hard job, I'd like it to be Mark Wood, but I think I'm going to go with Zoltz and say Atkinson. He's just a very fine bowler.
What about in white ball cricket? Zoltz, what's your dead certainty in your left field prediction?
Dead certainty is that, my left field prediction is that people will realise how ridiculous it is that India are refusing to play in Pakistan, and cricket will come to its senses. It seems that all the players want to play against each other. And Aggers mentioned the sort of Test cricket they used to play all the time. And I know there's sort of deep and complicated political issues behind it, but the fans all want to see it. Whenever we see a game on neutral territory, the fans always seem to get on really well. Great atmosphere in the grounds. But in terms of white ball cricket, my dead certainty is that people will be talking about the death of 50-over cricket throughout the year. That seems now inevitable. Particularly, the more dramatic World Cups become, the more people say that the format is dead.
Aggers?
Left field suggestion, white ball cricket, England will win the Champions Trophy.
Okay.
Dead cert, they won't.
Fine, I'll take that. We can go with that, and it will be very interesting. It's a short, sharp tournament, and you can find if you get on a roll that you can win it, even from improbable positions. Let's not forget Fakhar Zaman in the final of the 2017 tournament when he got Pakistan over the line. I'm going to chuck in one left field suggestion. That is that the stars will align, and we will see an opening partnership of Phil Salt and Michael Pepper in international cricket. And we're not far from it, and I, for one, am very, very excited.